En un mundo donde la verdad es un tesoro codiciado, una voz se alza para desvelar los secretos ocultos. Presentamos a Marybel González, una destacada periodista multimedia bilingüe en CBS News Chicago, con una impresionante trayectoria que abarca desde la frontera entre Estados Unidos y México hasta las luces de la ciudad de Chicago. Marybel González es una auténtica experta en periodismo, ganadora de 4 premios Emmy y con un prestigioso premio por su trabajo de investigación. Su compromiso con la verdad es incuestionable. Marybel no es ajena a la acción. Antes de unirse a CBS en el 2022, deslumbró como reportera bilingüe en Telemundo y como presentadora de noticias y reportera de investigación en el Sinclair Broadcast Group en Texas. Y eso no es todo. Marybel González también dejó su huella como reportera de investigación en la PBS de Denver. Su búsqueda implacable de la verdad la llevó a obtener una maestría en periodismo en la Universidad de Columbia en 2016. Hoy Marybel González llega a tu pantalla para desafiar tus percepciones y ampliar tus horizontes en Mente, un podcast que promete adentrarse en las historias que necesitas conocer. Bienvenida, Marybel González.
So, Marybel González, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us.
Thank you. It was a fun day.
We're excited to learn about your story and, of course, the way that you operate in the mind to get where you are today. I guess to begin, obviously, there is this concept that I learned not long ago, that in order to excel, you've got to sort of be adopting new values and new paradigms, new ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And I want to begin there because you're obviously in a space in what you do as a reporter, right, a journalist, right? What are the values you think you adopted in order to get to where you are today?
I think the most important thing is just always looking out for what is the story that people have to tell, right? They say the best communicators are the best listeners. So for me, that's something that I carry outside of work as well, is in order for me to learn, in order for me to get inspired, in order for me to even connect with people, I have to hear them, right? And I think nowadays...
So knowing the story.
No one really listens. I think everyone stops and wants to wait until that person's done talking so then they can start talking about themselves, right? But do you gain anything from that, interaction? I think for me, it's important to listen, to actually listen to people, because that's when you gain perspective, right? Yeah. And that's when you learn, and that's when you become inspired, and that's when you can take yourself outside of yourself and have empathy and relate to that person. So for me, I think that's one of the most important things that I think is underrated nowadays, is actually listening, like stopping and listening and absorbing what that other person is saying.
Totally. Well, who inspired you? Because you got to where you got here, obviously somebody planted that seed in your mind.
I think, 2 things. My mom, like many Mexican moms, she said humility is the best thing that you can have in life, right? And humility isn't making yourself feel less than, but understanding that everybody is important. Everybody has something to contribute to the world, to life. Everybody's lives matters. I think that was a big source of inspiration for me. And then also, and again, that goes back to the point of that teaches empathy, right? Being able to understand that everyone's important makes their struggles, makes their triumphs, makes what they're going through also important. So I think for me, that was the biggest inspiration. And then reading, I love books. And that was never about myself, right? That was more about learning other people's stories, how the world, different ways that the world works. I guess that's...
So you read a lot of biographies?
I read biographies, but also fiction. I read a lot of... Fiction, I think, is based a lot on reality, right? We write to what we know. Fiction are just experiences that haven't necessarily
happened. So sometimes
it's
just magnified realities.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So for me, I think that's where I learned, by reading, I learned to kind of be the observer of someone else's story and be able to take away lessons from that.
No, great lesson. Now, I want to continue to push on this idea, why journalism, not medicine? It's who planted that seed that you belonged in as a journalist, as a communicator?
So what's crazy is I didn't even know that this was a career.
Okay. You didn't know this was a career?
No, I didn't know this was a career. I had no idea that you could make a career out of this. I studied international relations in college. Yeah. I thought I was going to be a diplomat. I thought I was going to go to law school, and I was kind of going in between that. But then I also gravitated towards television and storytelling, and somehow always found a way to like intern, volunteer. You know, I gravitated towards that. I just didn't know you could actually study this as a career and you could be a journalist. But well, those little experiences of working behind the scenes, of video production, of talking to people, I started realizing that's what I want to do. And I started putting myself in situations where I was able to practice that. So I would say
Which were uncomfortable situations.
100%. And also free. Like back in my day, you know, when you interned somewhere, they never paid you. And there was a lot of times that I was just doing things for free just for the experience.
Yeah.
Kind of like the old school way. I don't know that that's the best way.
It's a good mindset of things.
But it was just this hunger for like, I want the experience and I want to be surrounded by people who are doing what I am so gravitated to, even if I didn't know exactly that that was a career. So then when I got serious about it, you know, I ended up going back to school. I got a master's in journalism. I said, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it right? And I wanted to get a good foundation. And then, you know, ever since then, it's been a ride.
I've got well, a couple of questions. Obviously, is did you? Most people sometimes when you see a Latina, right, that's in the media, they start with some of these channels like a Telemundo, Univision. Did you went directly to the English-speaking or not?
Yeah, I went directly to English, and then I saw, you know, for me, I think I look back now, and I've always valued being bilingual. I started in English, but I always was doing side projects in Spanish.
Okay.
And the language I think I dominated best on camera is English. But for me, I wanted to preserve my Spanish language. So I made it a point to like volunteer to do, you know, little projects in Spanish. Can I translate this story and tell it in Spanish? I just saw the importance of this is the story, this is information that my community also needs to know. And a way to get that information to them is in our language, is in Spanish. So I would make it a point to do things in Spanish. And what's interesting to me is along this career, unfortunately, I saw how people don't value the Spanish language content as much as they do in English, which to me doesn't make sense, right? Because this is the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing populations.
The Latino population? It's got to be the fastest growing for sure.
We have to get information out to our communities. Why not value that, you know, that community, that population, and getting that information to them? So I made it a point to do everything I was doing in English that I could in Spanish.
Okay.
And then later I saw an opportunity come up in Spanish at Telemundo in Chicago. And I was like, this is amazing. I've always wanted to work in Spanish. So it was actually a challenge for me to start working in Spanish because it's learning how to write in broadcast, you know, scripts, to how to go live in Spanish, how to ad-lib in Spanish. I mean, it really forced me out of my comfort zone because I spoke Spanish and I studied it, but that's one thing, and one thing to be on camera.
Absolutely.
Totally different, right? So I took that challenge upon myself, and everybody, unfortunately, would tell me, why would you go from English to Spanish?
Right, you went the other way,
That's
right?
a downgrade. Yeah. Can you believe that?
What? Well, yeah, everybody's got its opinion. I don't see it as a downgrade, but I do see it as the opposite of what most journalists and communicators do.
And see, for me, I was like, what an amazing opportunity to finesse my skills. What an amazing opportunity to challenge myself. What a great opportunity to reach out to a community that I belong to, and I can do it in Spanish and in English. Like, I just saw the you know, and down the line, going back to the point of this is the fastest growing population, I'm a firm believer in that sometimes on paper, you might have to take a couple steps, quote unquote, back to catapult yourself forward. And for me, everyone kept telling me it's a downgrade that you're going to Spanish news. And I said, no, it's not. The future is bilingualism.
The future is Latino.
The future is Latino. And I said, why wouldn't I want to be best prepared for when the time comes when everybody is bilingual? You know, it's becoming a hot, you know, trend to be bilingual, and it wasn't always like that, as you know. So for me, I'm like, this is an investment in myself and then in my community. And going back to the point of like how underrepresented we are, I just saw a post from the Pew Research Center that said only 8% of journalists in the country are Latinos. I mean, think about how disproportionate that is.
8%.
8%, when this is one of the fastest growing populations in the country. We're
Correct.
talking millions, right? Wow, right? And why not reach that community in a language that they understand? But they don't just speak Spanish. I mean, we know Latinos are
We come
so
so
different.
diverse, right.
So
Absolutely.
diverse. English as well, but and so many of us speak both. Why not be able to be able to navigate towards both of those languages?
No, that was great. Now, talk about skills, because obviously there are certain skills that in any profession need to be acquired and learned. And of course, obviously, for you, was research, right? Is not being afraid of camera, public speaking, all that stuff. But more, I think what I'm interested in is seeing how you emotionally reacted to the fact that, hey, you have to learn this, you have to learn this. Like you said, oh, I'm take this job where I have to polish my ability to write and communicate in Spanish, even though I love it and I know it, it's not the one thing that I've been doing every day. Like, how do you handle a challenge, in other words?
I think that so many people will agree, so many people who are here today also agree that the only way to grow is through challenge, right? Like, if you stay in your comfort zone, if you stay to what you know, it's so hard to get out of that, because who wants to be uncomfortable?
Right.
It's not a good feeling. But
everything you see, it's all about, like, if you're an entrepreneur, it's all about the great lifestyle and the jets and the cars and just, everything that's sold to you is just, don't stress.
Right.
Don't run. You don't need the problems in your life.
Yeah.
And the reality is that this is what I'm trying to extract, is that you run towards uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, and I love that you said earlier you have to run towards the problem.
Absolutely.
I think that that's the only way that you're going to grow. And maybe in that moment, because trust me, I had moments where I would cry. I would say, like, I'm not good enough for this. I had those moments of doubt.
And I want to hear about that, because for the lessons that we can all learn. If you can bring some of those moments where you thought, man, this ain't for me, or that's it, I want to throw in the towel. See if you can share some of that.
So I think it's a blessing to know what you're not good at, because then you can work on it. If I don't know what I need to improve, I'm not going to get better.
Right.
And I know that sounds very simple, but it's true. Like, when I would mess up, like if I wasn't writing my scripts fast enough in Spanish, you know what I would do? I would be frustrated. I would be, upset. If I couldn't find the words in that moment to write what I wanted to express, I would go home and I would read in Spanish. I would make it a point to only consume things in Spanish. So I would turn on the TV and only listen to Spanish. I'd only read books in Spanish, read articles in Spanish. I would take notes on my phone, of like, what are the phrases where I could, emulate or things like that. I mean, even though I'm bilingual, that was something I had to work on. So every time I would struggle, I would see that as an opportunity of, that's how I get better.
Very good.
Yeah.
And I guess in closing, what do you see for yourself in the next 5 years? Because I know every successful person is always aiming at becoming better, right? And so your road, the road you've taken to this point. Where do you see yourself? Like, what kind of a bigger project are you working towards?
I think the more I see, the more the years go by, the more I realize that I want to work on something that's bigger than myself. The more I want to do something that's going to leave an impact. And I don't know what that is yet, but I know what I want to feel. And what I want to feel is I want to create. I think part of the reasons why I was so attracted to this field is because you're creating every single day. Like, even though you are covering facts, you're covering events, the way that you tell those events is all in your creativity.
So in reality, you just be trying to be the best you can be at where you are right now, not too focused necessarily on
I mean, I am.
Which is great. You're becoming better.
I want to, but I also want to create, and whether that means, having some sort of a business to call mine, and to be able to inspire other people to do the same, to be able to leave a mark in the world and leave a legacy behind to, my children, and that's what I want to do. And I'm kind of like toying with a few things right now, but obviously growing in my career, but then also like continue to create something that is just mine. my passion project, which is to be determined.
Yeah. In terms of, just to wrap it up now, mental health is such a big thing these days,
Yeah.
right? Emotional intelligence is such a big thing. And the things that you do, I don't know, educate me, because I may be just assuming as you are reporting on a lot of the good things that you see out there, but also the bad things.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
'Cause you get to report on a lot of big things. I would say it probably more negative than positive. Yeah. How does that affect your day? Like when you have to soak all these things in, and then be able to leave that behind to then operate and continue to stay positive, motivated. How do you not let that drag you down?
The truth is, it does. It does drag you down. And one of the things about news, I always say this, right, is you're there at the best point in someone's life or at the absolute
At the worst. That's right.
So you are there when someone wins the lottery.
That's right.
You're covering their story, and you're also there when someone's loved one tragically dies in a very unfortunate way. Those extremes are hard to handle day to day, right? I think I was just talking to one of my colleagues about this today. It is traumatizing, especially if you're in the business of caring for people, because in journalism they tell you you're supposed to detach yourself from the story. You're supposed to.
You're human.
You're
Right,
human.
at the end of the day.
And at the end of the day, who tells the best stories? Someone who has humanity, right?
Totally.
And sure, you're not ethically supposed to change, the outcome of the story. Like, I can't intervene if something's going on, but that doesn't mean I don't care about the people who are affected. So the truth is, there is a lot of work to be done, especially in my field and among Latinos in journalism, is how do you handle that trauma on a day-to-day basis? There is a lot of work right now that's being done. Like, we've talked to psychologists who specialize in trauma in the news, but there is a lot of work to be done. But at the same time, it's one thing I did learn is you always have to remember why you're doing what you're doing. So as long as I consider my work to be important, that helps deal with all the negative that comes with, with the job, with seeing people at their absolute worst. But it's important for me to tell this story. Why? Because it's important for people to know that this is going on, right? As much as we all like to live in a bubble, the truth is the world is happening around us. And I think we are the historians,
Yeah.
We are the journalists are historians. We keep the record of history. I mean, think of COVID. Think of how important our role was to disseminate information about how people could stay safe. We were amplifying the voices of doctors. We were spreading facts when it was a time of so much misinformation going around.
Yeah.
So when I remember why this job is important, it helps me navigate through the day-to-day bad and, tragedy that we sometimes have to cover.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a reporter,
Yeah.
there's a space, right?
Yeah,
There's only 8%.
there's a need, there's a huge need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for inspiring, thanks for leading, and thanks for showing that you can accomplish what you want. We're going to leave Marybel González handle around here. Make sure you follow her and also share this to the people that you care about, because I know you got value from it. Marybel, thank you so much for the talk. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And
Likewise.
hopefully we'll have another one in the future.
I hope so.
Take care, everybody.